Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way is in Training. This is a podcast exploring how warriors should train and fight, as well as how they should live. We will talk about technique, but we'll also dive deep into fitness, mindset, and strategy. We will explore leadership and philosophy as well. So whether you are a young soldier, a veteran police officer, a responsible armed citizen, or simply someone looking for an authentic life, let's examine how the lessons of combat and preparation for it can help us fulfill our potential. Let's explore the way together and learn how the discipline of training can show us our true selves amidst the chaos of life. Hey everybody, welcome back. On this episode, I've got Callie Farill. She's both a canine trainer and a firearms trainer, known as Callie Bear on the internet. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got to be in the position you're in, Callie?
Absolutely. Well, I want to say thank you to you and Angela first before we get started. She's been supporting me for a really long time, and I'm really thankful for, all the love and sharing she's been doing for me. So, hey everybody, I'm Callie Farill. I'm the owner of the Valkyrie Tribe. I'm a former firefighter, former canine handler, and trainer, more so on the trainer side. I did a little bit of private handling. It's a very volatile environment as far as work goes. So I opted out of that, went to service dogs. That didn't work out. Again, pay is it's hard in the canine world. And then I was with a firearms instructor. I was dating him for a couple years, and I would train some of the females for his classes. I'd, have a couple, I'd pull them aside, and by the time that they were ready to rejoin the class, they were doing really well. Some of them were out shooting most of the men in the class. So kind of opened my eyes there for my ability to instruct. And whenever we broke up, I decided to start my own business. And here we are, 3.5 years later.
Has it been that long?
Yep.
Because I remember when you were posting stuff with him, just through Angela. You and Angela have been IG friends for quite a while now. So
long time.
I know she values that as well. So I'm kind of interested in talking to you because it's not something I'm an expert at. Like, Angela's really getting into the canine training lately as well. So I kind of am getting bits and pieces of it just from the sidelines, mainly from trying to help her out and supporting her. But how does training for that, how does that differ, and what are the parallels between, some of the training that I would be familiar with, or that most of my viewers would be familiar with, firearms training or fitness training or tactics? How is the dog training? How do you learn that, and how does it kind of sync up with the other stuff you've done?
So learning dog training, I actually started on YouTube. I got a dog. I got a German short hair a long time ago, and I've always kind of been a dog person. But I got on YouTube. I learned a couple things about marker training. Sent my service dog at the time. I sent him up to Idaho to get some bird dog training. And I went up there for a 3-day introduction. And the guy taught me clicker training. He actually trained Evan Hafer's dog with Black Rifle Coffee. It's the same bird dog trainer. Former military background. He's trained a lot of award-winning bird dogs. So the information that I was getting from him, I knew was sound. And he said everything is about the clicker and food. Timing is the most important thing when it comes to dog training. Now, there's a couple of methodologies. You've probably heard of Nipopo. That's the most common one. That one's very high speed, right? Nipopo is more for a Schutzhund handler or someone who maybe has a working dog that needs to channel drive. If you just have a pet, or you're trying to teach a dog normal commands like sit, stay, down, marker training, food, and a ball or a toy, that's going to be the most success. You have to know what your dog likes. If my dog doesn't like dog treats, but he likes a ball, I'm not going to use dog treats to train my dog. I'm going to use the ball, right? The reward system has to be fair to them. I can't pay you in pesos when you want American dollars. Right? It goes hand in hand. We really have to put ourselves in the position of the dog before we actually start training. What does this dog like? How does he act? What are his behaviors? Very similar to firearms instruction. I get a female that shows up. She's nervous as hell. She's never touched a gun. So I know that I'm going to have to spend a lot of time with her on the front end, desensitizing the firearm before I can even train.
And that's one of the things that's really struck me as interesting. And I want to articulate this carefully because otherwise people will get bent out of shape. But in a lot of ways, training people isn't that different, I don't think, than training a dog.
It's identical.
You know, I mean, obviously there's different motivators and different levels of complexity, but really you're looking for what motivates the individual. What is the individual trying to avoid? What is their buy-in? Why are they doing it? You know, getting them to buy in and getting them to understand the desired end result, what you're trying to get them to do. And it's, like I said, I know some people get bent out of shape being compared to, you know, a working dog that's being trained, but we're all biological organisms. We're all animals. I mean, you know, there's varying levels of intelligence and emotional complexity, but we're still an organism from the planet Earth, just like a dog is. We still follow the same rules of behavior. And that's the part that's really been fascinating me.
I use a process called back chaining. So this is a dog training process that I have transferred over into the firearms world. So back training, I want you to think of links of chain. You have the back and the front. You're at the front, you need to get to the back. So what are you going to do? You're going to create a picture for the dog or the human being for the end result. So if I'm teaching a dog how to track, this comes from Justin Rigney. If I'm teaching a dog how to track, I'm going to start them in a box with an object, right? And all you want to do is reward the end result, right? If I'm tracking to go to look for something, maybe we're doing an article search, the end result is the down on the object. So what you do is you create the picture for the end result, and then you make it more difficult as you go on, and you back the chain up to eventually to where maybe the dog is already down in the box. You pull him away from the box, different chain. Now he's going to drive forward, go to the end result. Now you go 2 chains back. Dog's got to go around a corner, and maybe the box is slightly over to the side. Dog goes around the corner, finds the box, down, right? And so on and so forth with the process until you're at your end result, which is the front of the chain. Same thing for pistols, for me specifically. I always teach women how to take a 50-yard shot with a pistol because that is the end result, right? Perfect trigger press, perfect sight alignment, and perfect grip. If you can do that, you can do anything with a pistol. So I teach them that first in dry fire. Whenever we're learning something, it's always about grip and trigger press first. Then we start focusing on the sights. Once you can run a trigger on a pistol, once you can pull a trigger smoothly, right? Smooth, not yanking, but nice and gentle. Once you can do that, making hard shots far away is so easy. You just have to be able to see it.
You know, and like another kind of way of looking at it, I think, of framing it. So say I want someone to be able to do an El Presidente, you know, turn and draw 2 shots each on 3 targets, reload 2 shots each on 3 targets. There's a lot going on there, right? There's a lot of distractors, a lot of things that interfere with mentally with the task of lining up the sights and pulling the trigger correctly. But I can get them to that point kind of with the same link in the chain analogy you were talking about. I can start out with just the simple 1 shot on 1 target and then start adding in the layers of complexity as it goes. And even for advanced people, so I've been kind of geeking out a lot lately on how there's a shooter named Eric Graffel. He's a competitive shooter, so I don't know if you've heard of him or not.
It sounds familiar.
He's arguably the best pistol shot that's ever lived as far as, like, you know, action shooting goes. I'm not talking about bullseye, but action shooting. And the way he trains is he very much does, rather than block style training, he does interleaving randomized training. And his way of upping the intensity is by adding layers of complexity. So he'll set up a course of fire and then run it basically the simplest way first. And then if he's successful, won't repeat that. He'll add another layer of complexity in.
Yeah.
And
I call it stacking stress.
Yep. I call it task stacking. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's because really shooting boils down to just 2 things: putting the sights in the right spot and not moving them when you pull the trigger. What makes it difficult is not that it's a complex thing. It's actually very simple, but it's all the complexities get layered in on top of it.
Yeah.
You know, all the movement, all the target transitions, all the weapon manipulations, all the
How much
psychological
bandwidth?
Yep.
How much bandwidth do you have at that moment to complete all the tasks. And that takes so
Yes.
much. That's why I started competing. Literally exactly why I started competing. Task management.
Yep. And building that bandwidth, like that's one of the things that I think the Eric Graffel style of training is good for. And I've been doing it to a degree for a while. I got it from a friend of mine who's a national champion, Les Martoni. And we used to do a drill called Calvin ball all the time, which was basically very randomized interleaving trainings, like horse with guns. You'd have 5 shooting positions and a bunch of targets, and every run would be different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we would make it more and more complex as we went. Start off with 1 shooting position, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then so on. And what I found is that builds not so much your performance on each individual task. Like, you still have to do the isolation work to do that. But what it does is it narrows the gap between the performance when the task is done by itself and when you task stack. Because initially there's a huge gap in performance. And you can narrow that by building kind of that bandwidth, like you said, that RAM in your processor and your subconscious. So you can handle more and more distractors and more layers of complexity. And it's a trainable thing, but most people don't train it.
No.
Most people don't approach it that way.
Mike Glover said something a long time ago. He's talking about like first responder care. And when you get stressed out, you always revert to your lowest level of training. Because that's what you're going to remember the most, right? The lowest level, not somewhere in the middle, not somewhere up high, the lowest. So in order to compete and do movements at a high level, you have to be able to stress yourself out enough to operate at that RAM, right? If you're going to want to run in the red and still be able to think about things, you have to put yourself in that red zone and then give yourself tasks to do while you're there. Because like I've watched a lot of these, I shoot with a lot of Green Berets. Like, you guys can go look at practice score if you're a Green Beret and go look at all the guys that I just beat at this last competition. Yeah, the only way I was able to get to that point was to compete and stress myself out. Right. Yep. That's it. I couldn't do it anywhere else. I can't do it in training. Like, you can only simulate so much in training, but until that timer goes off and you got 20 dudes standing behind you who shoot professionally for a living, like there's nothing that's going to stress you out like that.
It actually, I say this
you're
a lot.
Muted. I can't hear you.
How about now?
Is your mic muted?
No. How about now? I can edit this out. So.
What in the world? I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you fine. I can hear you. I don't think it's on my end.
Let me check my.
Anything? How about now?
Yep.
Anything?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
My headphones getting disconnected. So stacking stress, beating guys.
Yep. I'll make it to make it easy to edit. I'll say something and then we'll keep going from there. That way I can cut from you talking to me talking, because I had you just fine. So I know it recorded on your end. So I know we're good. One of the things that people say about matches that I really like, and I wish I could remember who said this because I quote it all the time now and I can't give proper credit because I forgot who said it. But they said that matches don't measure your ceiling, they measure your floor. They measure your baseline.
Yeah.
And that's why, like going back to the shooter I was talking about, Eric Graffel, if you watch him train, like he has training videos out there, and then you watch him in a match, And it's obvious that he's pushing himself much harder in training than he is in the match. And if you try to push yourself in the match or in the gunfight, right, everything falls apart because now you're redlined. And like what you were talking about earlier, I don't think it's so much that you're learning to operate at your red line, because that's really never going to be productive. I think it's more that you're moving your red line. You're building that RAM, you're building that processor speed, that bandwidth, so that now your red line has changed, right? You're still going to have to operate at like 90% of your red line, otherwise you'll make mistakes. But the 90% is a moving thing. It gets better and better as time goes by.
Yes.
So going back to the dog training, what's the equivalent stressor for a dog trainer? How do you do that in your training with working dogs?
With the dogs?
Yeah.
It all comes down to exposure, right? If someone's scared of the sound of the gun, they need to be exposed to the sound. Same thing with dogs. I start puppies out, and I might get hate for this, but I will take a 6-week-old puppy out to Home Depot and I will just put them down on the floor, and they'll be there for 10 minutes. No one gets to pet the dog. You can look at it all day long, but keep it moving. The whole goal of that is to desensitize the dog to the sounds, the smell, and the fact that there's people there. So we'll start there. When the dog's old enough to start learning commands, I actually start teaching my puppies as soon as they can see me. I start doing luring with food. Once they know how to sit, I will take them back to Home Depot and we'll start reworking the sit at Home Depot, eye contact only. And then once they're performing that and I can leave the picture and they're still completing the command, then I'll take them to a more chaotic area. I really like to take dogs to the very front door where there's a lot of traffic. The doors are constantly opening, right? There's all kinds of smells. Other dogs are walking in. That would be like the high stress level for a 13-week-old puppy, trying to do a sit stay, right? But that would be the end goal.
And it's funny because that goes back to the parallels with people. It's just stress inoculation, sounds like. It's like parachute jumping, right? My first parachute jump, all I remember is the black cat yelling at me to get out of his airplane, thinking that the ground looked like carpet, the parachute opening and yanking my neck, and then hitting the ground like a sack of potatoes, right? That's all I remember. Yeah. I remember those brief moments and nothing else. But by the 100th or 200th or 300th jump, you remember everything because you're inoculated to the stress, right? Or like the first time in a shoot house. No matter how good you are at shooting and no matter how much you understand the tactics, your first time running in a shoot house, you're using up a fair amount of bandwidth, right?
Oh, dude, I got tunnel vision the first time I was in a shoot house, and I waited until I lost tunnel vision to shoot. And the cadre were like, "Why in the fuck did it take you so long to pull those shots?" And I was like, "My world was this big just now. Like, I'm not going to pull the trigger until my world comes back out." And I was like, "I'm sorry, I'll go faster." But I came in. And I have button hooked to the right, and then I saw my guy, and all I could see was his face. That was it. Everything else was white. I could just see his face. And then I found my target, and I could only see my target. It's like, fuck, this is dangerous. This is so dangerous. And then finally spread back out.
So that's something that, and I'm going to touch on this. I think it kind of goes back to what we're talking about with the stress inoculation and the bandwidth and building all this, right? Everybody talks about these 3 physiological and psychological effects of being in a shooting that supposedly are immutable and do not change. They're wrong. I'm going to say flat out, they're wrong. There's the auditory exclusion, right? There's a tunnel vision, and there's the feeling of time slowing down, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the only one of those that shouldn't change is the feeling of time slowing down, because that actually means you're processing things at a subconscious level. And you're operating according to your training. That's that flow state, zone state things people talk about Mushin and martial arts, right? So that one's a good thing. But tunnel vision and auditory exclusion are completely trainable. Like you can train those away where they don't even happen, and you should. I'm not going to get into too many details and like go too far down the rabbit hole for a war story, but one of the shootings I got in, I sidestepped when the guy drew the gun, and I knew he had tunnel vision because I could literally see the expression in his face where he was wondering where I went. To him,
Yeah.
I disappeared like a ghetto ninja in a cloud of crack dust to him. Like I just wasn't there anymore. And that's something you want to train away through stress inoculation, because you don't want to deal with that handicap in the real world. And I think people, I'm really going down the rabbit hole, but here's another one. Here's another line of thought on this, right? So I think people confuse, and this is one of the good things about like modern research into gunfights and what happens under stress and all of this, is we have all this data now because of security video and dash cam video and, you know, body cam video from law enforcement and all of that. But one of the things people have done, and not everybody, but some of the people that do like the research into this, they make what I think is a grave logical error. And that is assuming that because someone who is not trained properly has a certain response to a stressor, that is the response everybody should train because it's going to happen to everyone. And that's not the case.
Mm-mm.
Things like I can't stand the retreating bill drill. And you see it all the time now because people do it all the time in body cam videos. And it's not, I'm not saying it would never
taking
be
a knee.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that the retreating bill drill would never be an appropriate response, but I am going to say I think it's seldom an appropriate response. I just really do. You're not increasing your survivability at all by doing that.
Left or right, do your bill drills laterally, not back and forth. Like just a quick essay for everybody. It's easier to shoot something going back and forth than it is left to right.
Yep. And I'm also a big fan, and I've done this in the real world, that if you're 7 yards or less from your opponent and there's no cover available, aggress towards them. After you step to the side, aggress towards them. Because psychologically, all fighting is still psychological. Mm-hmm. And psychologically, that presses them, as opposed to backing up, which looks like you're running away, which makes them think psychologically at like a lizard brain level, makes them think that they're winning. Whether they're really winning or not, it gives them the courage to keep fighting. Whereas
the only caveat I have to that is that if you're in a duty to retreat state,
yes, backing
up is your only option, because now if you go forward and you're essentially bluffing, it's really hard to defend that you were in fear for your life. So that would be like the only reason I would consider that drill.
No, and I can see that. And that's not, I remember my perspective is from someone who carried a gun for a living. So it's a bit different, right? War and police work, right? So it's a bit different. But just in terms of the pure fighting psychology of it, because that's another thing that I think people get wrong, is that they somehow think that the same rules don't apply to gunfights that apply to everything else. And the same rules of athletic performance apply. The same rules of psychology apply. You know, the same rules, the same principles of fighting an individual or a group of people apply, right? All those things still apply. They don't go out the window because it's firearms, right? All that human history of fighting with swords and spears and rocks and clubs and fighting in rings and on wrestling mats and like all those things still apply. Yeah. And people need to realize that, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's same for dogs too, right? Like body language, dogs aren't verbal creatures. We teach them commands because we're human beings and we like to talk. That's it. You could teach your dog in sign language and never say a word to your dog, and they would actually do better with the sign language than they would if you were trying to give them verbal commands. The only reason I would ever call my dog verbally is if he's an auditory exclusion. Right. But for the most part, when I call my dog, I'll do something like, shh, and he'll look at me and that's it. Right. They huff and puff and whine and yawn at each other. Here he is. Hey, bud, go Pluts. He heard me. He's a good boy. Thank you. But yeah, like, sorry, where was I going with that? I got distracted by my dog.
Body language cues versus verbal cues.
Yeah. So I teach, specifically in my women's classes, when we're doing reloads, I see a lot of this, right? And when you put your head down, you turn yourself into a rabbit. Rabbits put their head down to eat, they turn themselves into prey, then they come back up and look for predators. We want to try to keep our eyes up all the time, as much as possible, right? So that means staying off your phone, taking a peek around every once in a while. Same thing for dogs. Dogs are predators, right? You have to treat them with body language like a predator. If you come up to me aggressively, my dog's going to interpret that as aggression. And he's going to stand up and his hair is going to go up. He's not going to growl at you. He's just going to wait for you to do something. And then he'll intervene. But it's all body language, everything.
Well, and that translates once again, like take CQB, right? Like the really good teams that work together a lot barely even talk because they can read each other's body language because they've done it so many thousands of times and they know each other so well. And they have the nonverbal cues standardized, but even beyond the nonverbal cues, right? Because I mean, there's standardization for that, but there's knowing someone you work with and being able to tell just from their general body language what's going on.
It's energy.
Yeah, it's just so much of communication is nonverbal, even for us. We like to talk, but we don't get most of our data from the talking.
Nope. It's very, I don't understand why people lie so much. You know what I mean? Because you can see, I can at least, when someone says something that's a fib, I'm like, it doesn't feel right. And then like their eyes do this weird thing. I'm like, you're lying. This person's lying. Like it's very easy to tell when someone's unsure or inconfident. Like they have all kinds of these body language cues where maybe they're hunched over, their eyes are down, right? Like those kind of people, we need to help them and bring their confidence up. But also at the same time, like if you're female and you're like that, you're probably going to get yanked up because you look like an easy target. Your victim weight, just looking down all the time.
Well, and the flip side of the nonverbal communication, right, is things, and this is the stuff that, okay, so I'm just going to put it out there that the hard skill of shooting is vitally important. It's vitally important. It is probably the single most important piece of the puzzle. However, it is far from being the only piece of the puzzle. When you take all the other pieces of the puzzle and put them together, there's probably more importance there than just the hard skill of the shooting. Am I articulating like 10% that well?
Of it. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and your training.
You've got to be really good at it. Don't get me wrong. Like it's the piece that matters the most, but it's far from the only piece. And they all matter too. And one thing that I just can't understand how people fail to prioritize it is learning to read pre-attack cues, learning to read that attacker's body language when they're sizing you up, when they're doing those distracting movements right before they initiate the aggression. Like all of those things matter.
They don't know what to look for.
Well, but the information's out there. I mean, there's some well-written stuff on it. People just need to research it. And I think here's another tangent, rabbit hole again. All right, rabbit hole alert. All right, so we have never had so much information freely and readily available as we do now. And if you are serious about training for mastery in something, it is up to you to be a scholar of that thing, not just a practitioner of that thing.
Yeah.
And it may not feel like it's paying off dividends in the beginning, but in the long run, it will pay off dividends. And people need to research this stuff. You know, I mean, and I know I was talking about some of the mistakes made from researching shootings before, but that's just a mistaken interpretation. That doesn't mean the research isn't valuable, right? The research is incredibly valuable. If for nothing else, to look at like common TTPs, for lack of a better phrase, right? You know, techniques, tactics, and procedures on the parts of the bad guys. You know, I mean, people that are the bad guys, they do this for a living. So, and they're not, this is the other thing that people don't realize. They are not like us. They're not. They're just not. They're not looking at the world the same way. You can't appeal to their better nature. They don't have a softer side. Like you're either prey to them or you're a predator. If you're another predator, they don't really want the fight. Some do, but that's a rare percentage. That's a small percentage. And those guys are the ones you really need to worry about. But most of them
the Taliban's still here. I know they're getting roped up by the Trump administration, but they're here, they're prepared, and they've been training for a long time. And if you think that you're carrying your little 365 in your appendix and you shoot like once a year at the range is going to prepare you for a mass casualty event with the Taliban, you're wildly wrong and you will be woken up very quickly.
No, it's definitely, and people, it has always been a dangerous world.
Yep.
It always will be a dangerous world.
Yes.
People get lulled into a false sense of security that really isn't a reasonable assumption, and most people are lucky enough that for them, they're right. But that doesn't mean that it's because they did anything correctly by assuming that. It just means that they got lucky. Yeah. And, I'm not saying you should be paranoid or, and you don't have to go as far down the rabbit hole as I've gone. Like I just love martial arts and I love shooting and I love like the whole concept of it, right? It's why I became a soldier and a cop. So I kind of geek out on this stuff, but you don't have to be able to defend yourself. You don't have to go, you don't have to chase the dragon and try to be a USPSA grandmaster. You don't have to do those things. You don't have to get, you don't have to fight competitively. You don't have to do any of that to be more competent than you will likely need to be for anything that is probable to happen to you. But you do need.
Real quick, I think people get hung up on like what mastery is for shooting, and people put mastery on such a high pedestal. But honestly, guys, being a good pistol shooter isn't rocket science. Like I can make someone a good pistol shooter in a couple of days, but then now that they have that skill, they have to maintain it, and a lot of them don't. So it's the skill is easily achieved, but maintaining the skill is hard to do. That's where people fall off.
Well, and it's like, here's a conversation I've had with a lot of people, right? So you know how the classifications work in USPSA, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of. So it starts out at D.
There's like 40 of them.
Well, it starts out at D and it works its way up to A, and then there's Master and Grandmaster, right? Well, B class, which is just above the average for competitors, is probably about like having a black belt. Like it's really probably, if all you care about is being good enough to defend yourself and your loved ones, and I mean up to and including the Taliban thing, right?
Yeah.
Most Green Berets would be B class shooters if they shot USPSA. It's just, that's the way it is. Yeah. Same thing with the SEALs I know, the guys in the SMUs I know. Like it's B class is about what someone who carries a gun for a living should aspire to, unless they have a personal interest in taking it further. Yeah. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, more skill is never a bad thing. It's not bad to be better than that. But 12 guys who are B-class shooters that are also good at everything else coming through a building hunting for you is a really dangerous thing. Like that's, and people underestimate that, right? And it's the same thing. If you have all the other pieces of the puzzle, if you know how to fight well enough, you don't have to be a black belt, but if you know how to fight well enough, both striking and grappling, if you understand how that mixes in with your gun stuff, if you understand kind of environmental cues and pre-attack cues and what to look for in terms of just generally positioning yourself for success when you go somewhere, where's the exit? Where's the escape? Am I boxing myself into a corner? Am I pulling up too close to the car in front of me at the red light? Like all these little things. By the way,
everybody, all those little things don't take the entire time you're there to find it. Like these are things that happen in milliseconds. So you don't have to be sitting there paranoid about, okay, exit's still clear. Okay, it's good over here. That guy's like, that's not what we're doing. We're quick identification. All right, we're good. ID people. All right, fine. Back to life.
Yeah, no, it doesn't mean you have to be paranoid or not enjoy yourself or be nervous. No, it's just you get into a habit of putting yourself in a position that would be advantageous if something went wrong. That's all you're doing.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all you're doing. And it becomes a habit. And it's something you don't even think about after a while, right? And it's like a program running in the background of your computer. It's like it just runs in your subconscious and you just do it, And those little things combined with a fair amount of shooting skill and a fair amount of fighting skill, if you have the right, determination and mental drive. I hate to use the word mindset because it gets misused and abused. But if you have those things, you are head and shoulders above 99% of the human race, like right there.
For sure.
And it's now, and I enjoyed the pursuit for the pursuit's sake, and that's a different issue. And if that's what you're into, that's great. But don't think if you're somebody who's listening to this and you want to be able to defend yourself, but you don't want to spend hours every day working on this stuff. You don't really have to. Buy her book. Absolutely. Yep. Buy her book. Well, while we're at it, plug the book. Tell everybody where they
Okay,
can get it
so
and what the title is.
I was texting Angela this weekend about getting it published, and I'm sure she filled you in on some of the drama that's been going on with it. But I finally published it, and it was released yesterday. I had one edit to make on it, which went through a couple hours ago. So if you order the book, it'll take a little bit because it's got to go through the printing process. But I wrote a book called The Gun Owner's Guide to Safety and Accuracy, the Key to Success for New Pistol Owners. And it is, if you've never owned a gun before, or maybe you got one during COVID times and it's just sitting like in a case somewhere, this is the book for you. Or if you're another instructor and you're looking for new information to teach your students, get my book. It's on Kindle and Amazon Prime at the moment, and I will be looking for other publishing platforms to release it. But basically, I covered nomenclature for pistol and ammo. I talk about how to choose the right pistol for you. I talk about grip, how to find iron sights and red dots. And then I also cover like understanding yourself, stress levels, and kind of how to get through some of that with some breathing techniques.
I know people should definitely check it out. I went through it, Angela sent me a copy and I read it. It is a good guide, just like you said, for the new pistol owner to kind of get them to understand maybe the breadth of the topic is the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the things they need to think about and be aware of to get started.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely good. You should do an audiobook too, though. You're doing an audiobook?
I actually think I'm going to do an YouTube chapters of that, and then just run that through YouTube. A lot of people are visual learners. I'm a very visual learner, so I understand like reading the book is going to help a little bit, but unless you see it, you're not going to really grasp it 100%. So I think I'm going to go chapter by chapter and film that and just kind of sit here and go through the pistol with them. Kind of follow along style.
Make sure and send me a link to that when you get it done, and I'll help you get it out there because that'll be good.
Thank you.
Yeah, a funny story about mine. I decided to do the audiobook because mine has diagrams, but it's not really that kind of training book. It's a little more philosophical than that.
Right.
And I wanted to do an audiobook on it because people kept asking me for it. Well, I had literally just gotten done editing it like a month before, and the last thing I wanted to do was sit there and read my book, right?
Dude.
So I went through Amazon service for Audible, and you can actually like audition voice actors to do your book, and they get a cut of the profits, So I found this great guy. He was Canadian though. Great, like good voice for it. Did a great job. But every once in a while, he would like try to say a military acronym. It would come out very Canadian sounding. So I had to like redo those with him. I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. You got to change that. But he did a really good job, and it was very painless. Like he would just send me the chapters, and I'd approve them or not approve them, and then we published it, and he gets his cut, and I get my cut. So that was a lot better way for me to do it than force myself to sit there and read the whole thing I'd just written. Because
mine's only 74 pages. 74 pages, and like 4 pages of it is a dictionary and some tactical terms and like promo codes and stuff like that. Like mine's a very short read. So I could do an audio. I probably should. So I'm going to look more into that, but I really want to do the YouTube playlist just for like a safety issue for some people. I know a lot of people are really nervous about handling their pistol.
No, I like that idea a lot. That's a good idea. And I'm kind of I've got something similar coming up. Have you ever heard of Make Ready TV and Deo Productions? Yeah. I'm doing some instructional videos with them. We're filming them this summer, and I'm looking forward to getting those out there. And it's going to kind of be the same thing. It's going to be like my curriculum that I teach, but broken down into video format. And I like the idea of having that where people can access it. Maybe if they can't get to my class, or it's just I like the idea of people being able to check it out and access it, and hopefully they get something valuable out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too, man. Like I spent 3 years teaching this class, and it's like I want to help more people, and the only way to help more people is to put the information out where it's more available. So I can't travel all the way around the world. I can't like just pick up and go to Oregon tomorrow. Like I have a dog and life. I can't just do that. So book, YouTube, Audible, like I know I'm not making $200 per student on that, but if I have freaking 4 million people buy the book, like I've helped everybody at this point. Like what do I do now?
Well, and also I think it's nice to preserve, for lack of a better word, your doctrine, like what you believe in, what you're teaching. It's nice to have that preserved. And like you said, hopefully people get value out of it. Hopefully it helps people. But it's just, I like the idea of just having that recorded and preserved and where it will be around. And hopefully people will get value out of it.
They should, man. Like I've sent it to a couple of people, and I heard back from my editor a couple of times that they were really excited to do it because they got to read the book first for free, which was pretty cool for them. But there's a lot of information in the firearms world, and it's very dense and it's very spread out. So I've created this book. It's kind of like the yellow brick road. Here's your introduction into all of the basics, right? The people who are really good at shooting are masters at the basics. That is it.
Yep.
Right. Bottom level, be good at that and you will be a good shooter. And I just laid it out for them. Here you go.
I think mastery of anything is mastery of the basics in that craft, to be honest. It's kind of like our conversation earlier. What makes it advanced is the layers of distraction and complexity that get added onto it. But it's still the basic task. Yeah. Look at anybody in special operations. They're really good at the basic battle drills. Like that's something that they teach infantry in basic training, but mastering those makes you a good soldier,
Yeah.
Even like the most, I know it's everybody thinks it's the sexiest thing we do, but like CQB is just small unit tactics inside a structure. Like it's still the same battle drills. It's just compressed, and getting really good at those foundational building blocks. Like they even have a fancy phrase for it now in sports psychology. It's called chunking, right? But all that really means is you have these chunks of the basics that you assemble in advanced ways. And the better you are at those chunks and the better your brain is at assembling them to solve whatever problem you're given, the better you are at the skill, right?
Yeah.
And, like that applies to athletes and sports teams. It applies to people in the military. It applies to competitive shooters. I'm sure it applies to dog trainers too. Like, having those chunks of skill and then having that highly developed ability to subconsciously address the task at hand by assembling the correct chunks of skill.
I like how they put that, chunking.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of, I don't know, buzzwords are buzzwords, but sometimes they give you the value in buzzwords like that, I think, is the same value that's in coaching cues.
Yeah.
Because different coaching cues kind of give you a different way of trying to spark understanding in a student. And I think that the value in these different ways of phrasing things is because some person may get it from that way as opposed to a different way. Like that whole being in the zone or being in a flow state or the mushin, like those are different ways of saying the same thing. But one of those explanations, if you explain them, they're all explained slightly differently, but they're the same thing. So one of those ways of explaining them might resonate with one person, whereas a different one might resonate with someone else and get them to the point they need to be at. And
that's why I take classes from other instructors, man. I want to see how they're delivering, not what they're teaching, but how are they delivering the information?
How are they
going to help the students?
How are they imparting the lessons? How are they getting the information to the students? And that's the hardest part. Like in teaching is hard, and it's a skill, and it's a skill separate from the skill being taught, and
being a good shooter doesn't make you a good teacher.
No, it does not. Not even close.
Oh, no, man.
There are plenty of good shooters who, and this is not a negative comment about them. I kind of wish I was that lucky. But there are plenty of really good shooters out there who are so talented that they don't understand how they got as good as they are. Like they can tell you the drills they did and they can tell you a bit of the process, but they don't understand the nuances and the fine points. And then there's other guys like Rob Epifania or Tim Herron that can like give you all the little subtleties and nuances to help you get there because they truly understand it. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean the other guys aren't really good shooters too. They are. They just don't really understand how they got that good. And sometimes I think the people
Yeah.
that have to work a little bit harder understand it a little bit better. But that could just be me trying to make myself feel better.
Oh no, man. I see. If you want to be a good shooter, just learn how to take distant shots. And that goes with precision rifle or pistol. Learn how to shoot far and slow. And once you can do that, everything else is very easy. You just continue stacking that stress, man.
So I've got a caveat here as well, that to be fast and accurate, you have to learn how to push the speed while still maintaining acceptable accuracy. And there's nuances to that that are different than the slow aim fire shot. Having said that, the first thing I do in my classes is bullseye shooting. And the first thing I do in every one of my training sessions is bullseye shooting, even though I'm not a big fan of shooting bullseyes. Like, I would much rather run and gun. But
the task itself isn't what we're looking at. What we're looking at is grip, trigger press, and sight picture. Once those three are fine-tuned enough, then we start working on control pairs and doubles very quickly and very close.
oh yeah.
And I don't care about upper A zone bullshit, all these GBs. If you're a Green Beret and you're only training upper A zone, you need to spread your margin of error out, because I can tell you right now, all these guys that are shooting really, really, really slow so they can always hit that upper A zone because they'll get chewed out if they don't. When you go to war, it's not going to matter. Your sight, you need to widen your margin of error so you can make critically aimed shots very, very quickly. Like, I shouldn't be out shooting you and speed on pistol.
And one of the things I like to, I like to scale these things up and down, right? So I categorize shots 3 different ways. There's optimal, acceptable, and unacceptable, right? So acceptable is not a fail for the drill. Unacceptable is. And unacceptable is not necessarily a miss. It depends on how you define it for that drill, right? But like, people look at drills, I think, the wrong way some of the time. Like, the point of the drill is not the drill itself. The point of the drill is, what kind of training effect am I trying to create by working the drill?
Yes.
So like take a bill drill. Like, you can take a bill drill, and if somebody is shooting too slow, you can give them the whole silhouette at 5 yards and make them push the speed. If somebody is fast but sloppy, you can make them do it on a head box at 7 yards, right? And make them tighten it up. And I find that works a lot better for developing kind of that mental transmission shooters need than just saying stuff like, be more accurate or go faster or go slower, because none of that really works anyway, because when we're in the right state mentally for athletic performance, we don't process time. So if I tell somebody to go faster, they just start making mistakes. If I tell them to go slower, they do the same screwed up shit they did fast, except now they do it slow. At least they were fast before, right? Yeah. So I like scaling that stuff up and down. I think there's a time and a place for upper half of the A zone. I think there's a time and a place for the whole silhouette. And I think that even more important than that, and I think this is what, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but this is kind of how I interpreted what you were saying, and I agree 100%, is that not allowing yourself to make errors in training is the death of improvement.
Yes, 100%.
It doesn't mean you can allow yourself errors in application. You may not be able to, depending on the application, right? But if you don't allow yourself to make a mistake in training, you're not going to learn. You're just doing what you're comfortable with over and over and over again. You're never going to get better. You'll get to a certain point, like you'll get to a decent point, but you won't get any past that, right?
I tell the guys that I shoot with, the only difference between me and them, right? When we're training together, they are out shooting me, but when we compete, I outshoot them. My margin of error is better.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, and this is another thing okay, rabbit hole alert again. All right, so this is another thing that I really like. Everybody misunderstands how good they are.
Yes.
Everybody thinks that one run where they hooked it up out of 30, when there was no pressure and nothing was on the line, is how good they are. And that's not the case. That run average with the other 29 runs is how good they actually are, right? Under stress when it matters. And that's one of the great things about matches is they make you do it one time and it counts and it's under stress. And that's a whole different animal than doing it in practice. It's a different thing. And ideally, you need to understand that because it's no different in the real world, right? You don't know what the gunfight's going to be till it happens, and you get one chance. And you're not warmed up, and you're probably not in the best headspace, right? You didn't get to prepare for a day. Yeah, you didn't.
Performance on demand.
You didn't get to prepare for a day and get a really good meal the night before and get 9 hours of sleep and wake up and do a nice gentle warm-up workout and dry fire a little bit so you're ready and then go meet the guy for the duel. That's not how it works, right? So people need to train appropriately to create that performance on demand. And in the beginning, it doesn't look any different than anybody else in the beginning of firearms training. But when you get to a certain point, you need to change your training modality to increase performance on demand rather than just looking at the peaks, right?
Yeah.
It's not about peaks and valleys. It's about a nice, steady state of performance. And that shift is hard for people. It was hard for me to do because of ego. That's the other killer of improvement is ego, right? Mm-hmm. But it's hard to let go of the fact that, if I roll the dice right, I can do this run that looks really, really cool on Instagram and realize that that's not really how good you are. And that's not how you should be training, really. I mean, there's a time and a place for swinging for the fences, but it's a very small percentage of what you should be doing.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people, if you look at my social media, it looks like that I am shooting all of the time, and I am not. I dry fire. If I can't make it to the range, I at least try to dry fire for 5 or 10 minutes once a week at most, but I do a lot of visualization. So if I'm like just hanging out or doing something, I might watch a video and watch a good run. I really like to watch Joe Farewell or Justine Williams. They're really good professional shooters. And I sit there and I visualize myself repping what they're doing. Right. So if you look at the studies of visualization, when you visualize, you're getting 80% of that rep. And then I follow up the rest of that rep at the range. So I'm fulfilling my training and I'm condensing it into a small amount of time. And then I isolate a lot of stuff too, right? I'll isolate doing double feeds. I'll isolate reloads. I'll isolate getting into position. And then at the end of the training, I'll put it together.
Yep. And the whole visualization thing is key, right? It's so important. And that's actually, I've been doing a lot of my dry fire in this virtual reality simulator for the last year.
Yeah.
And, some people are pretty skeptical. And if you don't use it right, I don't think it's an advantage. But if you use it correctly, and using it correctly, part of that is the visualization you're talking about. It allows you to really visualize very well with moving targets, and you're moving, and you get feedback on where the hits were to see if it matches what you picked up when you called your shots and all of that. So it's kind of grooving in the same way you're talking about that. And I do what you're talking about too. I love pulling up good GM level shooters from a first person view in their videos, because then I can look at it like I'm looking at the dot on my gun, and I've done enough of this where I know what their feet are doing. I don't need to see that. I can tell by watching the video in the first person, and I can make it a visualization process. So no, I like that a lot. Actually, when I had my surgeries a year ago, I did a lot of, air quotes, dry fire in my hospital room, simply driving my eyes to points on the tile.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a huge part of it, putting your eye in the right place. If you have a good index built up, then that is so important, just putting your eye in the right place. Half the time, if I get a Charlie, it's because I just put my eyes in the wrong place. That's all it was. It wasn't a trigger press issue, wasn't a grip issue. It was simply, I looked at the wrong place on the target and decided to send it because I felt time pressure.
Yep. Oh yeah, I've been there. Or initially when you're first shooting with a red dot, your focus will shift from the dot to the target. And if you're getting spread out groups and you feel like you're staring at your target, you're probably not. You're probably staring at your dot.
Yeah.
And really training target focus is even for iron sight shooters, it's a very difficult thing to ingrain.
And my personal feeling, and this is, so I know very good shooters who shoot with iron sights, front sight focused, even at close ranges, but they're the outliers.
Mm-hmm.
My personal feeling is most people are better off with iron sights to train themselves to shoot target focused for everything. But it's a long process, and a lot of people don't intuitively understand it.
Yeah.
Right. But I think they're better off. And with an optic, it's essential. It's absolutely 100% essential. You know, even on a rifle,
And
it's essential.
if you're struggling with, you're an iron sight shooter and you're transitioning to a red dot, if you're struggling with that, I recommend turning your dot off and then presenting the pistol. So the window, you're just looking through the center of the window. Get a couple of presentations like that, turn your dot on, look at a small target, and then do the same thing. Bring that window to your eye, and that dot is just going to show up. The reason why iron sight shooters transitioning have a problem is because their presentation, they're presenting the pistol so high, they're presenting it like it has iron sights, and the dot is actually like up here on their eyebrow instead of like pointing back at their eye. Their presentation needs to be smaller or lower, excuse me.
And the other piece of that, I think, is with iron sights, you learn to subconsciously clean up the sight picture before it's even a sight picture. As soon as you can see the sights in your peripheral vision, you're already cleaning up the alignment of the gun.
Yep.
With the optic, you can't see the dot until it's at your eye line.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to have a good index build. And
yep.
I like doing something similar to what you talked about. It's not turning the dot off, but rather than have people draw and they can't find the dot, and they draw and they can't find the dot, I'll have them do draws in reverse. So I can take all the time in the world to find the dot, and then move the pistol to the holster in the reverse of the draw, and do that a few times, and then just reverse it. And usually that cleans it up pretty good too.
Oh yeah. I've noticed a lot of people they're like looking at their target, but their pistols are pointed kind of down like this, or maybe it's too high up and all they're seeing is their front sight. I'm like, you need to look for your window first. Look for the window first. Once that window is perfectly in line, everything else just shows up. So it's like, look for your front sight first. Horseshoes there, target focus. Look for your window, dots there, target focus.
Well, and I think people don't realize too. So one of the benefits of the optic, I think, apart from the pure shooting benefits, is the training benefit, because you can see all the movement in the sights. It's hard to see in irons, right? And that's a huge strength for it. But people start to want to refine the sight picture further than it needs to be for a particular shot, because they can see that dot, right? Yeah. And talking about shooting through the window, like there's plenty of shots, 7 yards and in, there's plenty of times where you should be able to get an optimal hit on that target simply shooting through the window. Like you might see the dot, but you're not looking for the dot. You're just looking for the window. And that is something I think people underestimate, because it's one of the ways people who have not shot optics talk a lot about optics being slow up close. It's not that they're slow up close, it's they're using them incorrectly up close. So
I like to train taking my dots out. So I've done this with Jeff at Sub-Second. We'll take the batteries out and then run the drill with no dot. So 50-yard buy-in shot, lateral shots, and then you got to hit the steel to end the thing. And we did I think I may have only had 2 deltas out of like 8 targets altogether. You don't need a battery. You don't need a dot. You need the window, right? Just center the window around the target, open your field of view up, pull the trigger. You'll be fine.
Well, real quick, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you, either for firearms training or for canine stuff, like what your social media presence is, what your company is, all that stuff. Let everybody know so they can seek you out.
For sure. So if you look up Callie Bear on Instagram with 2 underscores, because Callie Bear was already taken. So Callie Bear, The Valkyrie Tribe also is on Instagram and Facebook. I don't use Facebook that much, but it's there. If you want to send me an email, it's Callie@thevalkyrietribe.com, or just go to my website, thevalkyrietribe.com, scroll all the way to the bottom and fill out the contact form. I have training packages on there. You can buy my book on there. Going to be removing the book from the website soon. So if you want to buy the book, it'll be on Amazon. And then for canine stuff, I don't really do too much canine stuff anymore. Canine Services Unlimited up in Tennessee, or you can hit up, I'll post it on social media, but Mountain over in Virginia, he's got a canine company.
Okay.
Top.
Well, thanks for coming on. I'm glad we finally got to talk. Like I said, you and Angela have been friends for years, so it's nice to have a good conversation with you. And I appreciate all the advice you've given her for the canine stuff too. Thank you very much. It's much appreciated.
Very welcome. I think she made her calling as a dog trainer. She's actually inherently good at it.
She's really good at it. She really is. And she enjoys it. So, and that Mal, I love her all tooth and fang and, choosing violence of her. But she's a handful. The GSD is too, but not the same way. It's just
different kind of drive.
Well, it's funny because, and I made this comment to Angela a few months ago, and I kind of thought about it, and I think it's the best way to sum it up. They're both amazingly athletic. They're both amazingly smart. Our German Shepherd is an East German working line. He was bred to be a guard dog, and he is very much a guard dog. He patrols the perimeter of the house. He scares the Amazon driver to death. Like, he is a guard dog, right? And then Callie, no relation, or Mal, is an attack dog. Like, it's a different drive. Like, they're both driven, they're both athletic in different ways. Like, he's like big and burly. She can turn on a dime and like leap 33 feet in the air, right? Whereas he's like, he's like the heavyweight fighter and she's like the gymnast.
Yeah.
Right? Oh
yeah.
So it's pretty cool to see. It really is. But like I said, thank you for all the advice you've given her and all the help you've given her. It's really appreciated. I'm glad you got your book done. I liked it, and I hope it does well. Sure it will. Everybody out there should check it out. And I hope everyone had as much of a good time as I did with this conversation. We only had 4 or 5 rabbit holes. That's less than average, I think, for me, but they were good ones. So thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and I will see everybody next time.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Way is in Training. Please come back again as we explore how training makes us better at our craft and better in our everyday lives. See all of you soon.